Welcome back to a new episode of Customer States they never got the phone wet, but somehow there's water inside. And as usual, we're going to see some liquid damage. It's actually not a lot, but it's enough to short out a large capacitor on the backside of the motherboard. So we're going to go ahead and pull this motherboard out and take a look at it. So this is the top side of the board where the screen connects. And usually these things that I'm pulling off here, they're like little foam tape gasket things. And they don't usually look like this. These have gotten so hot that they've sort of like shriveled up, which is common to see if you've been soldering on the motherboard. But if a short can produce enough heat to make that little gasket foam tape shrivel up, then you know it's getting pretty hot. And it was actually too hot to touch earlier when we had plugged in a new battery to it. So at this point I'm just going to pull off all this tape, trying to see if I see any obvious problems in that area. And everything looks fine as far as I can tell. So of course we're going to flip it around. And obviously you can look at those capacitors there and see that they're corroded. I pulled off this back cover just to double check under here and see if any liquid or corrosion was under this, because that does happen a lot. But it looks pretty obvious at this point that these capacitors are a problem. Very corroded on the ends. It got so hot you can see little solder balls popping out of other components there. So this is just under the thermal cam, just to confirm what we basically know and try to narrow down where the area is. As you can see, 3 areas are getting hot there, but after physically looking at the board, we can say it's most likely one of those capacitors that looked all corroded. So again, just to double check and be more accurate, I'm going to freeze spray the board and then add power, and that's our problem. Not 100% sure that this is the issue, but it seems unlikely that it would be the other chip that got hot. So we're going to remove the capacitor there and then test the contacts. And you can see the pad on the right side is really corroded. I even try to scrape away a little bit of the corrosion to make sure I get a good electrical connection. So we're putting our multimeter in diode mode, putting our red probe on ground, and then black probe on the contact points there, just to see what we get. On the left side, we get a connection. On the right side, we don't. And just to look at that area on ZXW, since we have this fancy program here, you can see the right side is backlight, responsible for backlight. And the left side is ground, so everything's looking good then. And we also, so the way I'm able to turn off and on the power so quickly to make it glow and get hot is we're hooking it to a DC power supply and then using a cable to connect that to the motherboard. And I can turn the power on and off pretty quickly. So we're going to put a little flux on there and add leaded solder. And you'll see that I'm trying to get the leaded solder onto that right pad, but the corrosion is preventing the pad from taking solder very well. So you can see me kind of just scratch away a little bit. And I keep going from the left pad to the right pad because there's already a nice ball of leaded solder on that left pad. And I'm just trying to drag some over to make them even, while at the same time scratching away on that right pad with the tip a little bit to try to get some of that corrosion off of there. And then we'll just go ahead and clean it up with a little isopropyl alcohol I think this is like 90%. I would use 90% or above. Then a little more flux. And I stole this capacitor from the exact same phone, actually, in the same spot, but you could find these capacitors all over different boards. And it's likely that the phone would have turned on. Well, actually, I don't think, maybe backlight probably wouldn't have worked, but the phone would have booted though. So after replacing it, or just cleaning it with a little wipe and alcohol and a toothbrush. And the toothbrush kind of gives you some idea of the scale as well, too, of what we're dealing with. And this one was pretty straightforward, pretty obvious problem. We didn't need to use the thermal cam. It's just a handy tool that I do have here. And it can really be helpful when the short is not as obvious as this. Sometimes they put out very little heat. So after seating the board back into the frame, we're going to go ahead and connect the screen again and plug it in. And I did make sure to test one more time before I plug everything back in, make sure the board's not short like it was. I didn't get a shot of the USB meter, but as soon as I plugged it in, I could see that there was power being drawn. Obviously, you can see the little battery icon comes on now. Then after a little bit of wait, looks like I use a little wand to make it appear, and we get a boot again. We should get the phone to fully boot here in just a second. There we go. If you enjoyed the video, give me a like and subscribe. Really appreciate it.